Hey everyone, Vortex here, and today I'm going to talk about the Temple of Time. The Temple of Time is seen in multiple games, but it takes a different appearance and serves a different purpose in each one of them. This theory is quite complex and spans multiple timelines, so I'm going to start from the very beginning. To help understand this theory a little bit better, I've made my own timeline, based on the one from Hyrule Historia. This one includes the various wars that have occurred, including what I speculate to be their placement in the timeline. The Temple of Time that we see in Ocarina and onwards is actually the successor to the original ancient Temple of Time that we see in the Lanayru Desert. After the events of Skyward Sword, there's an era called the Era of Chaos where a new Temple of Time is constructed by Hyrule, the Sage of Light. He intentionally built a new Temple of Time on the remains of the sealed grounds. That's because this ancient site contains the Gate of Time created by Hylia, which means it's inherently connected to time itself and the ability to transcend time. The reason why this temple was made after all these years is because the ability to safeguard the Triforce was being threatened. People heard stories about power that could change a mere mortal into a god, and people coveted that power. This is also the era where the Interlopers, which we see in Twilight Princess, attempt to take this power for themselves to transcend their mortality. In Hyrule Historia, this era of chaos is described as a time where the legends of a supreme power spread throughout the land, whetting the appetites of those who would possess the Triforce and inciting vicious battles between them. This sounds very similar to the legends spoken of in Twilight Princess, where the Interlopers fought wars across Hyrule in order to obtain the power of the gods. The Triforce did not have a sacred resting place during the Era of Chaos. It was literally sitting in Hyrule and not in a sacred realm. The Interlopers seized this opportunity to obtain power beyond imagination and assaulted the royal family. Luckily, the goddesses intervened and tasked the light spirits with sealing the Interlopers. After the Interlopers were sealed, it became apparent that there was a need of a well-protected resting place for the Triforce, in order to stop people obsessed with its power to try and steal it. This led to the royal family, under the guidance of one of the early Princess Zeldas, to instruct the sages to seal the Triforce until it was needed. In Hyrule Historia, it's said that the Sage of Light, Hyrule, undertakes this task to construct a temple and devise a powerful seal to hide the Triforce. This new Temple of Time incorporated various safety measures to prevent entry. There was a need for 3 spiritual stones, the Ocarina of Time and the Hero of Time, to unseal the last seal, which is the Master Sword. All of this was necessary to prevent another war regarding the Triforce. Hyrule then stayed behind to protect the Temple of Light, where the Triforce dwelt for the rest of eternity. The Chamber of Sages that we see in Ocarina of Time is part of the Temple of Light, which in turn is said to be the center of the sacred realm. The Temple of Light seems to be connected to the Temple of Time through the use of a portal, which we can see in both Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess. However, this entrance to the sacred realm is man-made and it can be relocated or closed off entirely by the sages. During Ocarina of Time, the Temple of Time is said to be the only entrance to the sacred realm. The role of the Temple of Time changes drastically in the different timelines that split from the events of Ocarina of Time. The reason why is because the fate of the temple seems to be directly tied to the fate of the Hero of Time, or better yet, a lack of that hero. It's interesting to note that every single timeline branch is followed by a war, ignited by a lust for power. We'll start with the first timeline that branches from Ocarina of Time, the Downfall timeline. This is the timeline that occurs because the Hero of Time fell in battle against Ganondorf. According to Hyrule Historia, Link didn't fall until the final battle, so everything that happened previous to this battle still occurred. This means he did in fact awaken all the sages in this timeline, and Hyrule Castle and its surrounding towns were still destroyed. So, as a final resort, the 7 sages of Hyrule, led by Princess Zelda, sealed Ganon and the Triforce in the Sacred Realm. For a brief time, it seemed as though peace had returned to the kingdom. However, there are many who knew of the existence of the Triforce now and the entrance to the Sacred Realm. This paved the way for yet another conflict regarding the Triforce, the Imprisoning War. People consumed with lust for the Triforce rushed to gain entrance to the Holy Land, causing yet again a bloody conflict much like the Interloper War. The King of Hyrule ordered the 7 sages to seal the only known entrance to the Sacred Realm, but instead they were met by demons who descended upon them from within the realm itself. A fierce battle unfolded in which a majority of the combatants were killed. This is the reason why we find the Master Sword in the woods. After the Hero of Time fell, the sword was returned to the pedestal by the sages, but it could not be drawn anymore since the hero had fallen. To prove this, Hyrule Historia says this: the Master Sword was once stored within a temple, but the temple decayed and turned into a forest. The temple it speaks of is in fact the Temple of Time. The people simply abandoned their homes instead of rebuilding. Because of this, the legends regarding the Triforce and the Blade of Evil's Bane were forgotten, and the Temple of Time decayed and was overtaken by the Lost Woods. This is why we find the Master Sword in A Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds in this location. The Pyramid of Power that we see in A Link to the Past seems to actually be the Temple of Light. Since the original connection between the Sacred Realm and the Temple of Time was sealed, it's likely a new connection was forged between the two worlds in Hyrule Castle. The Temple of Light is said to exist in the center of the Sacred Realm, while the Pyramid sits in the very center of the Dark World. It's also not a coincidence that the Triforce is found in the center of the Pyramid of Power. The second timeline that spawned due to Zelda sending Link back in time to relive his childhood is quite similar to the Downfall timeline. War once again ravaged the lands of Hyrule. The war I'm speaking of is the Gerudo-Hylian War that followed the betrayal of the King of the Gerudo. As I mentioned in my theory about the Arbiter's Grounds, the war between the Gerudo and the Hylians escalated to a point where Hyrule Castle and its surrounding villages were destroyed. Evidence for this can be found in Hyrule Historia and the game Twilight Princess. The location where you find the Master Sword is simply referred to as an ancient temple, but when you view the surrounding areas, you'll find quite a few landmarks that indicate that this is in fact the Temple of Time from Ocarina of Time. The forested ruins where you meet Skull Kid look astonishingly similar to Hyrule Castle town, including the fountain in the middle. Since Majora's Mask Link was sent back to a time before he had laid hands on the Master Sword, the seal had never been broken and Ganondorf was not able to enter the Sacred Realm. The royal family was unable to relocate the sword since they could not draw it, only the hero could, and Zelda sent Link away with the Ocarina of Time to prevent Ganondorf from obtaining the keys to unlock the seal. Link was thus not part of the war between the Gerudo and the Hylians. Instead, he was fighting to protect the lands of Termina. When Majora's Mask Link returned to Hyrule, he didn't encounter the peace he had hoped for. Instead, he found the ravaged land. I think part of the feelings of resentment from the hero Shade are related to this. Hyrule had to rebuild once again. In order to prevent people from yet again attempting to enter the Sacred Realm, the temple and its secrets were left abandoned, to be forgotten. The old ruins containing the Temple of Time and the old castle town were soon overtaken by the expanding Lost Woods. It would be easier to protect the land from the greed of man if man had no idea what power was sleeping in the Temple of Time. These events are very similar to the ones from the Downfall timeline. Since the destruction caused by the Gerudo-Hylian War was rather significant, the royal family decided to relocate their castle to the north so it will become the new center of the Kingdom of Hyrule. This is the castle that you encounter during Twilight Princess. It seems the kingdom had gained new borders during the war, as the land is a little larger. The kingdom also gained more prominent neighbors in this era, as the Ordonians and the mountain residents are not regarded as being in Hyrule proper. It seems the choice to relocate the castle instead of rebuilding has to do with placing the new castle at the center of the new kingdom. Now this part contains a bit more speculation. This is regarding the inner workings of the Temple of Time that you encounter during Twilight Princess. While the dungeon that you encounter within the ancient ruins is called the Temple of Time, I have a hunch that it should actually be referred to as the Temple of Light. While to explore the temple, Link must first enter a portal into what seems to be a different realm. The portal is created using the Master Sword, also a key to the Sacred Realm. If you take a look around the temple, there's one symbol that makes an appearance in almost every single room: the Medallion of Light. One interesting detail regarding the Temple of Time dungeon is that the Master Sword in the past seems to be missing. This could be because there can only be one Master Sword in existence at the same time, but there's also another theory about this. What if Twilight Princess Link was sent to the adult timeline of the Hero of Time, where the Temple of Time was still intact? The Link from Ocarina of Time was sealed away in the Temple of Light for 7 years, until he was old enough to bear the burden of being the Hero of Time. When he awakens, the Sage of Light Rauru had already been awakened and immediately bestowed the Light Medallion upon him. But who awakened Rauru? Was he never sealed by Ganondorf like the other sages were? It's not likely that Rauru was spared this fate. Ganondorf himself entered the Temple of Light in order to reach the Triforce. Rauru was the last bastion standing between Ganondorf and complete domination of Hyrule. Since Twilight Princess Link physically enters the Temple of Light and manages to kill the monsters inhabiting it, it's likely this released Rauru as well. The boss of the Temple of Time is called Armor Goma, a strikingly similar monster to Goma from Ocarina of Time, a monster created by Ganondorf. It would be impossible for this monster to claim the Temple of Light on its own, without aid from a more powerful being. It couldn't have gotten into the Temple of Light by accident. I have a hunch that Armor Goma was placed here by Ganondorf when he obtained the Triforce and left it there to prevent the sage from being awakened. Hyrule in the meantime was able to keep the Chamber of Sages intact while the Hero of Time was resting, ensuring that Ganondorf was not able to get to him. When Twilight Princess Link destroyed Armagoma and left the time period, he unwittingly aided his ancestor in his own quest, ensuring the Hero of Time would be successful and thereby ensuring his own existence. And now for the final timeline, the adult timeline, where the Hero of Time managed to aid in sealing Ganon, but he was sent back to his own time period afterwards. This action left this timeline devoid of a hero, causing the kingdom to still fall many years later. When Ganondorf resurfaced, there was no hero to stop him. The people of Hyrule prayed, but the gods did not answer in the way they had hoped. The goddesses decided to flood Hyrule. This fate was, according to them, less harsh than letting Ganondorf rule. What happened to the Temple of Time between the events of Ocarina of Time and the Wind Waker can be deduced from what we see in the flooded lands of Hyrule. Most of this is based off speculation, but I think it's interesting to share nonetheless. The Master Sword in the Wind Waker is found in the basement of Hyrule Castle, which had been stuck in time. It's not too surprising that removing the sword also allowed time to tick once more. Since the Hero of Time vanished in this timeline, the sword was left in the remains of Ganon's castle. Just like in the Downfall timeline, the sword was returned to the pedestal of time by the sages. The kingdom was left in ruins, with only the Temple of Time left relatively intact. It's possible for the royal family to have renovated the Temple of Time into the new Hyrule Castle following the defeat of Ganon. The castle that we see in the Wind Waker does not look like a typical castle, and in fact resembles the building style of Romanesque churches more, kind of like the Temple of Time from Ocarina of Time. This even somewhat allows the Ocarina of Time map to be overlaid with the Great Sea. Death Mountain can be seen as Dragon Roost Island and Kokiri Forest as the Forest Haven. But what about the Temple of Light? I think this temple makes a reappearance in the Wind Waker again, but this time in the shape of the Tower of the Gods. The Tower of the Gods is summoned by Link's need to prove he is worthy of being considered a hero, and thus worthy of the Triforce itself. It's not much of a surprise that the Tower of the Gods happens to be right on top what's left of the old Hyrule Castle / Temple of Time. In this case, the Temple of Light seems to physically manifest itself in Hyrule, and it doesn't contain itself to the Sacred Realm. The Tower of the Gods from the Wind Waker shares many similarities with the Temple of Light in Twilight Princess. Both are towers with similar music, statues that can be controlled through the use of items, numeral mechanical beamos and armos, a Dark Knot mini-boss, and a room with a balance scale that requires the weight of statues to manipulate. Both temples also feature technology which exceeds the rest of Hyrule substantially, such as lasers and bridges made of pure light. Both temples also share similar architectural aspects, like the golden decoration, pillars, and wall inscriptions. So in short, the state that the Temple of Time is in differs greatly between timelines, but it can be found in all three timelines following the events of Ocarina of Time. Along with this, the Temple of Light can also be seen in multiple games, but its appearance heavily depends on the state of the Sacred Realm it's located in. Hey everyone, thanks for watching, and if you like this video, check out some of my other Zelda stuff.